Anecdotes for success. Level up with truth, meaning, trade-offs, perspective.
Well,
all right, Matt, we have Scott. He'll tell us the story. I'm sure I know him as the old dog Scott, but I'm excited to have him on the podcast tonight because I've been drawn to his account for several years. We've DM'd on Twitter and and I've built so many good relationships on Twitter, but his account, Matt, is super authentic. Like when he tweets, I really feel like he's just talking like he's going to talk tonight. Like there's no doubt about it. And I can't wait for you to hear his take on education, his take on society. And I was pitting you earlier as the evil business owner, Matt, and you know I don't believe that. I mean, at all, but I had to say that. So Scott, welcome.
well, thank you. Like we were saying earlier, this is a couple of years in the making, Paul. We've been chatting back and forth and DMing and liking each other's tweets and stuff for a very long time now, and so this is pretty cool. With that, and so we were just talking about my handle, the old dog Scott, and it started. So I started Twitter just basically to get stuff on like the Oregon Ducks and maybe the Trailblazers and stuff like that. And I thought that was pretty cool. And then sort of started sliding into some other stuff and found some other things that were kind of interesting. And then I got this weird idea that I kind of wanted to start, maybe building my own sort of Twitter presence. But I didn't really have, I was a teacher and I was like, nobody cares about that. And, all these sorts of things going on. But I had a beautiful Australian Shepherd, and his name was Archie. And actually, I think he might still be the banner on my Twitter account. But and so I got a picture of him, a cool picture of him, and I'm like, well, I'm kind of old. My name is Scott. Well, yeah, I'll just be the old dog Scott. The funny thing is that people that knew me, from here in real life, sort of they saw it on there and they're like, old dog Scott. I mean, everybody was just like, what is that all about? And I was like, yeah, I had to come up with something. That was my niche. And so, yeah, I'm still the old dog Scott on there, but that's the only place. So anyway.
I love it. We're Matt. Matt always asks all the questions, and then I try to chime in. Matt's just a super curious guy. I mean, I do well myself, but Scott, the great thing about these podcasts is when I bring Matt in, I'm like, hey, I got a guest, and he never knows who the guest's going to be till he just saw you come on the Zoom screen, and so he knows nothing, and that's why he's so curious. But see if I get this right, Scott. You're am I allowed to give a guess to your age? You don't care,
Yes,
right?
go for it.
I know you're in your second half of your 50s, right?
Yeah.
And he's a PE teacher, right?
Yes.
Elementary.
Yes.
So you're a superhero to little kids because I think that's when little kids still like to be physically active and move, but I know it's getting more difficult.
But I tell you what, that age has gone down as far as that. I mean, second graders, I'm an absolute superhero. I mean, we have a great time, and they are all over. Every single thing that we ever do is the greatest thing they've ever done. And so third graders are still pretty good. Fourth graders, they're starting to kind of separate. And then by fifth and sixth, the kids that want to play still play. The kids that don't, they're tough. And the population that I served in my previous school was very low socioeconomically. Primarily, most of them were either newcomers or had been here a very short time from Mexico. We had about a 90% of our school was Latino, and great kids, awesome, super kids, but had no opportunities to really move or play or do anything because they lived in kind of a downtown area of a fairly good sized city, 125,000 people in the city. So movement was an option to them, and play was an option to them, and play to them was video games or computer games and things like that. So It was a lot of work. I mean, it was tough, but we have a good time. And my philosophy, I'm not very good at being on the sidelines for as a teacher. So I'm a much better point guard than I am a coach, and so I play with them all the time. And so, this last year we had 9 classes a day, and I was playing 9, for a half an hour, and we start immediately. I mean, we got to get these kids running and playing and laughing, and so yeah, I love being an elementary school PE teacher. It's the best.
And I know you tweet a lot about movement and the
Hmm.
outdoors, and
Hmm.
I know that's your mission and your purpose. And I don't know how far back you want to go, but I feel like so many people miss out on that.
I I would agree. It's interesting. So for me growing up, I learned how to climb a tree by climbing a tree. And we went in the woods and we were playing, capture the flag and chasing each other, playing tag, and we were, trying to escape the boogeyman, and we were trying to do all sorts of things. And it was in the woods, and it was constant movement, constant action, and then we would play some baseball, but then we'd go back out in the woods, and then we come back and play some basketball, but then we would go, out to the field, and then we'd play some football. And, and it was such an idyllic way to grow up. I actually grew up in this area that I'm living in now. Um, and Portland was a city of, 350,000, and maybe a metropolitan area of probably a little less than 1 million when I was growing up. Now it's 2.5, 3 million for the metropolitan area, and everything is so close together in the woods. Nobody goes out in the woods anymore. Nobody does these things, and that's such a tragedy, because that there was no parents there, and they weren't watching us. They weren't watching over us. They weren't dictating the rules. They weren't telling us how to get along with each other. We had to figure all of that stuff out, every bit. And then we took all those skills to school, and then in our PE classes we could apply, those negotiation skills with each other. We could apply those, the way to scale games so that everybody had a role, because when you're playing a game, the point of the game is to keep playing the game, and so you learn how to even out teams, because the point wasn't necessarily to win. The point was to keep the game going. And the kids that I just recently taught had none of that at all. And so my class was about as much of that as I possibly could set up. And so we got the rope out, and we got all kinds of stuff, and they were swinging on the rope, and they were, jumping off the stage, and, we had mats everywhere so they could, jump and roll and fall and get up and, take falling down without taking offense, things like that. And because they just missed out on it. So yeah, I that makes me sad.
Yeah, Scott, you actually answered one of the first questions I had when you mentioned about the kids not playing like they used to. My
Mhm.
my question was going to be, what's the downside to that? Forget the physical fitness part of it, which is obvious, but
Mhm.
what's the other part of it? And you just explained that very
Mhm.
well, I think. And because I was curious what your thoughts were with that, someone who's obviously been doing it a long time. So
Mhm.
is that what you see, to kind of back up to what you just said, is kids aren't as able to negotiate their environment in the real world through
Mhm.
through literal negotiation, as in
Absolutely.
what you're just talking about, and then, as you said as well, the point of play is to continue the game. It's almost like
Mhm.
life, right? The point
Mhm.
is to continue to be able to ask back into the game to play, whether it's baseball, capture the flag, business, hanging out with
Mhm.
your friends, whatever the case may be. So,
Yep.
when have you seen these changes, and what are the results of those changes?
So we moved back up here, back up to the Portland area 8 years ago. I spent the previous 10 years in a K through 8 school in rural Southern Oregon. And that was very much more along the lines of what I grew up doing with that.
Mm.
And so those kids were outside a lot, but then we were outside a lot at school and doing a lot of just stuff. And the point was to move. The point was not to win. The point was not to dominate your opponent. The point was not to, score a touchdown and do a touchdown dance or anything like that. Again, the point was to continue the game. The point was to find roles for everyone in the game, or actually, I shouldn't even say find roles for, allow everyone to find their role.
Mm.
With that. And when the point is only about who wins, then that becomes the total and complete focus. And the kids that maybe aren't skilled enough, or maybe aren't aggressive enough, who maybe aren't really confident enough to try to engage in that game, there's nothing for them. Because nobody wants to get dominated. Nobody wants to try their best and continually get beat and not have a chance to win. We learned how to get away around that when I was a kid, because the game was the most important. Winning wasn't the most important. And I think when we moved back up here, I noticed that a great deal more. It's gotten much worse in the last 3-4 years with that. But those skills that you mentioned, the negotiation one is huge, and the ability to be aware of yourself and kind of your own feelings and what's going on in the game, not just your physical self, but your emotional self, right? And trying to stay calm, trying to stay, that engaged but calm, so you can make the next move. Those things, but being aware of what everyone else is doing. And then at the same time, being aware of the kind of the macro thing, which is this game working for everyone, right? And caring about whether this game is working for everyone. And, so that's tough. And my kids in my the school I'm just taught at, and that's a hard lesson for them, because all they see is win, win, win. They see Ronaldo and doing his goal celebrations, and that's all they want to do. And that's all they kind of understand, and that's their impression of what games are. And that's a tough impression to get over.
You just by the way you're talking, it brings me back to my favorite movie, The Sandlot.
That's a great movie.
Because if you think about it, it was just playing the game. Like
Yep.
they weren't even playing for the most of the movie. They weren't even playing against anybody. It was
Nope.
just about having a baseball and making people fit in to go with the flow.
Mm.
And that's what I think. I never thought about the movie that way until you just brought that up,
Oh,
Scott. But
it's Paul. That's so awesome, because when you think about it, so I grew up when I was a little kid on a cul-de-sac. It had 4 or 5 houses in there, and each of the houses had kids, but they were all different ages, right? I was by far the youngest, but I had the sports equipment. I had the ball, and I had the bat, and I had a basketball, and so I got to play with them because I had the stuff. Now, at first, I can recall them, not being super happy about it, and not really, I didn't really get a fair shake. But as they kept going on, and as we kind of grew together as a group, um, we all found our role. We found a place, and we were tight. And some of those kids were 10 years older than I was, with that. But we got a chance, and it's because what became the most important thing was the game, because the game ruled all, and that's what we focused on. It was beautiful. I loved growing up there.
Scott, so as you mentioned earlier that you got into Twitter and decided to create or attempt to create a presence of some sort of your own.
Right.
What was that? And what was the presence you wanted to create? What presence have you created if they're not the same? And and why?
Those are great questions. So I think 2020 was such a bizarre year. I mean, March 17th of 2020, we went fully online, and that was mind altering. I mean, it was crazy. And and so I think part of my thing on there was I was like, I can't do this anymore. I mean, this is crazy. If we can't be in school, I don't really have a place.
Mhm.
And so I got to find something else to do, and I got to make some money. I got to build a business, whatever it may be. And then, then I was trying to figure out what it was. And I mean, and so I think at the time, what was I, 50, I don't know, was it 54? Yeah, 54. And so here I am. I'm old. I'm not really a tech guy, obviously. And I don't really get this stuff. What am I good at? Well, I like to run. I've been successful as a hacker, hacker runner. I've I love to hike. I love to backpack. I love to get outside. I'm an athlete. I'm a teacher. So I, I tried to make it a little bit, my tweets kind of like what kids might hear in my class. Some of my quips, some of my weird observations, some of my really weird connections that I would make between sports and real life situations, and like that. And I hooked up with some really good people, some kids, some young kids. I mean, they were kids. I mean, they're really young, but they're really good at it, and they really helped me with my presence, and helped me with my message, and how to build an audience and such like this. The reason that it got up to a certain level and it kind of plateaued is because I was like, okay, but what do I have? What's my solution? What am I selling people here? What's my offer? And I
Mhm.
really didn't have one. I mean, necessarily, other than the fact that, I think I'm a pretty good guy, and I like to talk, and I like to have fun, and I'm well read. I like to I like to converse. I'm curious. I think that's why Paul and I get along so well, is that, we're kind of along those same lines, with that. But I didn't really have an offer. And so I just kind of backed off a little bit, and in terms of trying just to create new stuff, and just kind of, let life kind of unfold, let my social media presence kind of unfold. And recently, I've decided that I kind of want to pick up the intensity again. And it will be, me, just who I am, and trying to bring my various interests into whatever conversations that people want to have with me.
What is that? What you have to offer? You?
Yeah, I think right
Okay.
now it is. I mean, and so then you start bringing things in like, all right, so what are you? And so I'm 57, and I still run and act and jump and play like a 14-year-old. And I think there's some lessons that can be learned from that,
Mhm.
in terms of nutrition, in terms of working out, in terms of mindset, in terms of focus, in terms of some habits. I mean, things like, I know people will tweet a lot about not having Netflix or not having TV and things like that. We haven't had TV in the house in 4 years, 4.5 years, and I haven't watched a newscast in 5 years.
Good for
So
you.
when the submarine thing starts getting
Mm.
tweeted on Twitter, I'm just like, what is that? What's going on? What are they talking about, a submarine thing? So I have to actually look it up, and then I say, okay, got it. And it's and so I've got those kind of habits. I get up every morning. I haven't woken up to an alarm clock in probably 5 years. I get up every morning between 3:30 and 4. And I sit down and I journal and I write just kind of top of mind stuff, just kind of what's going on. And so I've got a lot of those kind of sort of life skills that a lot of people talk about as being, things that you help you be successful. And so I do those things. And so that's probably going to be, the direction I go.
Interesting.
That's what I love. I got involved more in Twitter during COVID, of course, and
Mhm.
I went back and got securities license and thought I was going to be part of money Twitter forever. And then I find myself competing with all these 20-something-year-olds that really haven't lived life, but they're tweeting
Right.
like they've lived life. Does that make sense? And it would make me mad, and I would be starting to fight back with them. I'm like, what am I even doing? And at the end of the
Great.
day, you know, you just have to be your authentic self, and you just pinned it. There's so many lessons people could learn from you because you've had the experience.
Right. And because I've made a lot of mistakes, and
Absolutely.
I mean the TV thing. Well, it's not. I didn't come out of my college days going, yeah, you know what, TV's bad. It's because I watched too much damn TV, and my attitude was terrible because of it. And and Paul, I totally agree with what you're talking about the young kids, because a lot of stuff that I see tweeted, I'm just like, are you what? That doesn't make any sense. First of all, you're 20. How would you know? And if you haven't had to change multiple diapers, if you haven't had to, don't tell me how to raise my kids. You don't know.
I
And so
Oh, sorry. I call it like the masculinity Twitter, the fatherhood Twitter. And I used to reach
yeah,
out to some of them thinking I could be part of the community. It's like, hey, I get it. I'm 51. I have grown daughters that are independent. I can help you out. And then crickets.
right,
Because they don't want you there. They're
right.
literally they're playing off people that don't know any better. And I, Scott, I think you're part of what I call perspective Twitter.
Okay,
Because we like all we're doing is just sharing perspective. I don't want to say the other side like we're going downhill, but we
right,
are on the other side. Is that a fair statement?
absolutely,
Yeah. So yeah. I mean, so you share your journey, your stories, your
right,
mistakes, what you're doing now, and it's just funny the crickets you hear from people. But
right.
I love what you're doing just for those reasons.
Well, it's funny because I tweeted the other day, because it's so funny. Sometimes people, especially when they're young, they go, "Oh, you're old," and they say it like they're, one, apologizing for it, or two, they think it's going to hurt my feelings, and I'm like, well, duh, yeah, I'm old. I'm 57. I mean, I get it. But so my tweet was like, hey, I'm 57. I'm old, but I'm not stupid. I'm not slow. I'm not weak, and I'm not unskilled. And so those things, I used to love playing. So I lost my hair pretty early, and
Yeah, me
I
too.
used to play city league basketball until my mid 30s, I guess. I played a bit of that, and I would remember I'd play, and these guys would come out, and they're choosing who they're going to guard and all this kind of stuff, and I inevitably got called the old guy or the bald guy. I got the old guy, I got the bald guy. And so, in the first 5 minutes of the game, I dropped three or four threes on them, and do some stuff, and then I just kind of look at him and say, anything else? you know I mean, don't make a judgment based on the appearance, especially something like that. But I embrace it. I mean, because
Yeah.
what other choice do we have, right? I mean, I'm not going to hide from it. Yeah, I'm 57. You want to race?
I know Matt's got some good questions, but that's it. Like I tell everybody 50 is the new 30. That's what I say,
Uh-huh.
you know.
Yeah,
When you're teaching, like you get older every year and your clientele, your students stay the same. So the
right.
fact that you still have that energy, that's what I always say, like it's harder and harder each year, but you're doing it. And
Yes.
an 18-year-old, a 25-year-old, I don't know. They just think everything. I don't. They just don't know. And that's why when I say perspective Twitter, that's why I love your tweets because it's sinking in. Whether you're the mom or dad they don't want to listen to, or the uncle that just comes in and drops some advice. What
Right.
you're doing is working. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, and you're 57. They will be someday, God willing, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's not, that always cracks me up, as if someone's immune to such a thing.
Right.
There's only one way to be immune to it, and that's not good.
And it's not good. No, it's like when my mom, she, when she'll complain about a birthday, I'm like, Mom, what's the other option?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, come
So,
on.
Scott, so tell me about the shirt you're wearing. Does that have any kind of meaning,
Well, it
or
says it
just was on
says
the top of the pile?
it says don't tread on anyone. it's funny. I really try to avoid labels because, especially when you're talking political, I mean, political labels have become so loaded and have become
Agreed.
so complex. And so when you look at, like, when I was growing up, the parties would talk about a plank, and there was probably about, like, what, 6 or 8 things on the plank. And if you agreed with 5 of them, you're in pretty good shape, with being on that political party. Now these planks are, like, I mean, they are so complex and so convoluted, and there's so many different,
Mhm.
people that are represented in so many different areas that it's like it's become mind numbing. And so I've kind of gradually gone towards, I guess, libertarianism, although I even hate that label because it's the same kind of thing. It's literally just there's so much going on. So anyways,
Interesting. I can relate to everything you said there, and probably a vast majority of this country probably could. Um, I'm with you. The labels are too, it's too convoluted, and I figured it had something maybe to do with that, but I couldn't let it pass without asking.
and I'll be honest with you. So my rules in my PE class are really simple: be kind,
Hmm.
play hard, and have fun. But your fun can't ruin somebody else's fun. And so that, to me, I mean, don't tread on anyone. That basically encapsulates that, because that's all it's about. You know what? We're going to be kind, not nice. You don't have to be, disingenuous. You don't have to
Right.
be. You don't have to like everyone. But kindness is a requirement. Play hard. That means you do your best. And then have fun, which is why we're here. But the fun, it can't ruin somebody else's fun. Now, if somebody's like, well, but what if their fun is based on winning or losing? Well, then they're going to have a problem. But I'm talking about, don't steal their stuff, don't bully them, don't say anything mean to them. Just, let's just go from there. So that's been kind of my mantra. So when I saw this shirt, I was like, okay, I got to have that.
Yeah, got it. Those sound
But
like real.
those are rules that would take you through your entire life, and you don't see that.
Yes.
Paul, I was going to say the same thing.
Oh,
Those are just values. No, I'm glad you said it. Those are just values that if anyone has those values, yeah, you're gonna do pretty well.
Hmm. And I mean, I know that's what Paul teaches, because Paul's tweets and his program, and that's my big thing in my classes. And when I was a classroom teacher, it was the same thing. With that is that school so much becomes about the stuff, the curriculum and all that, and it's not about the stuff. The stuff is not really that complex, and it's not that difficult. But what is difficult is learning how to learn, but then learning how to learn in the context of a school when other people are there to learn as well, how to negotiate those things, right? Which we talked about earlier. And so anything that I can do to kind of crystallize that for them in some pretty tight, concise statements, I think works pretty well.
you summed it up. I played in a pretty large best ball golf tournament this weekend, and
Hmm.
now that my girls are grown up and out of college, I was asked by a former student, and if he's listening, I know he listens, so he's going to laugh. I can't remember if he graduated in 2005 or 2007, doesn't matter. But
Uh-huh.
when I was there, there were probably a half a dozen to a dozen other ex-students that play golf, and there's a social hour and we get talking. And I always ask them, I'm like, "What do you remember? Like, what did I actually teach you in the classroom?" And they never mention curriculum, Scott. Like, there's not one note,
Right.
there's not one fact. They're just like, we just remember the energy. And if you picked on us and we picked on you, you just laughed. Like, you didn't send us to the office. And
Right.
but they were bored, they just go on, and it's the priceless stuff. I wish more young educators know
Hmm.
that's there if they waited out a while.
Well, it's interesting when you hear some teachers. So every time I get asked, "Oh, what do you teach?" When somebody finds out I'm a teacher, what do you teach? Well, I teach children. And
Finally.
and or I teach young humans. Well, no, I mean, what do you teach? well, what do you mean? And it's like, well, what subject? Oh, my subject is PE, or, whatever it may have been. We don't, the focus should not be on the stuff. The focus is on the people in front of us. And, you know, um, the only difference between them and us is that I've got more experience than they do. That's it. I am no better, no
Yeah.
worse, anything like that. And I don't need to save them. But I do need to let them know that I respect them and that I'm there for them and that we can do this together. And I'm not there to judge. I'm not there to do anything but help them. And so,
So Scott, you've been doing this, I'm going to do some math here, 30, 35 years. Is that a good guess?
no, man, I started late. I got an MBA and I was going to set the world on fire in
No
business. And
way.
with that, so I started. This is my just finished my 20th year.
Okay. Okay. Great. Great. So you've
Yep.
been doing it a long time, though. It
Yeah.
doesn't change my question.
Yeah.
So my question is, what's what's changed for better and for worse in these last 20 years that's just noticeable to you?
um, I would say kids aren't kids as long as they used to be. There's a real seems to be a real um, they're attempting to be teenagers when they're 10 a
Mm,
lot more now than when I started. When I started, um, kids were kids, really for quite a while. And then I had the pleasure of, being the K through 8. And so I had the 7th and 8th grade program for all subjects with there. And the great thing about it, that those kids got to be kids until they were 14 with that. And so I've just noticed that society seems to be pressuring, and I don't think it's on purpose, but it's just kind of the direction we're going, forcing kids to drop their childhood much earlier,
mm,
and that's the biggest thing. And so, you know, you've got kids that they're unhappier. I mean, we got boyfriend girlfriend things going on, third grade, second grade, and it's just like, what is that all
right.
about? Girls had cooties until I was a 7th grader. I know that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Agreed.
so this makes sense to me now. I always feel because I played college golf. I played on mini tours. I was supposed to be the next Tiger Woods. Well, and here I am talking to you guys with no disrespect, you know.
Right.
I was in the business finance world for 2 years, and my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, was a high school counselor, and I'm like, what you do seems so crazy fun. And I went back at nights and didn't start teaching until I was 25. And
Mhm.
I feel like, do you feel the perspective you get by having an alternative track before education is better than just going through the entire system? Or am I making too broad of a stereotype there?
No, I don't think so. I chose to go back.
Me too.
I mean,
Yeah.
that was so you want to talk about maybe one of the bigger problems in education is kids don't get to choose anything. And so if there's no choice, if they're
Mm,
not making the choice, then they're not going to be engaged. And so for me as an educator, I was engaged because I went back and let's see, I had kids. My kids were like second grade and kindergarten when I went back. So it was a financial hardship for me to go back to school to get my master's and my certification, with that. So I chose it. I was fired up. I was excited. I wanted to get this thing done. And that became, kind of what I did, when I went to the classroom. I took all that energy with me because I wanted it. And I think had I done it as a 23-year-old, I wouldn't have had that perspective. I wouldn't have wanted it. I would have been, sometimes people think that teaching is settling, which I think is just crazy. I think those people find out really quickly when they get a classroom that it's a heck of a lot harder than they thought. And you need to be able to bring energy and passion and resilience and all that kind of stuff with you every day. And so I think if I had to come in as a 23-year-old, I don't think I would have been nearly as ineffective as an educator as I was when I came in when I was 36, 37 with that. So
I agree. Someone told me once the problem with education, and I always cringe when they say that because they're usually not educators, right?
right,
That in education, you're a student, you grow up, you graduate, you go to college, then you become a teacher. You're institutionalized.
right,
And even in prison, the inmates weren't always inmates. They had a free life before they came back into prison by bad choices. And
right.
it's hard to change the paradigm and the perspective, and it's hard to change how education should be when the people in education always just know education. And that's why
Right.
when I didn't even know that about you, but it makes sense. The fact you chose to come back like I did, I
Mhm.
think we need more of that.
I I agree, and it's I see the kids. I see young kids, and we had incredible turnover at my the school I just taught at, and 23-year-olds coming in, 23-year-olds coming in and getting punched in the face, not literally, but punched in the face with the reality of it, and not having any sort of perspective on anything. They have nothing to compare it to, other than their life as far as, through college or what have you, and no work experience. I mean, you know, I feel badly for them because, I mean, teaching is difficult. And you know, that's kind of the dirty little secret, is that it is exceptionally difficult, and um, it can be sad if you let it, because some of these kids, this, Paul, I mean, some of these kids are live in situations that are just horrendous, and have to do things and see things and experience things that nobody should ever have to see, much less a child, and they have to see them consistently. And yet then they're expected to go to school and perform at school and do those kind of things. It makes me cringe when I see all the comparisons to, private school to public schools, and private schools are so much better, and yada yada. you know a great analogy of that is the fact that a business has a back door where all the raw materials come in, and they get to deny raw materials that are not up to standard. I mean, that's a private school right there. They get to deny anyone they want. And whereas a public school, we open the door and say, you're all welcome. Do we do everything perfectly? Absolutely not. And we have a crap ton of problems, and some of them are intractable, and I get it, but the mission is still the same. And the fact is that anyone that needs an education, they can get it with us. And that's something that I think, as educators, we need to be proud of, and need to be a little bit more strident about, is say, you know what, I don't care if you're defective, you're welcome here, with that. So, and then these kids that are teaching, they don't necessarily know this, and they don't have anything to fall back on when it gets tough, because it does.
Matt, you see this on your end. I mean, you're grateful for anything we try to push forward because if they don't make it through education, then there are problems you see.
Well, we had a guest on, Paul, months ago, and I forget her name, but she said something that I've thought of many times since. She was an educator, Scott,
Mhm.
and we were talking about school systems, et cetera, and me not having walked in your shoes that you guys fill. One of the things she said, though, that hit home to me, she said, "You, as a business owner," she said, "you're." I think I'd said something, Scott, about but what's my opinion matter? Or I don't know, or something like
Uh-huh.
that. She said, "No, no. On the contrary, your opinion matters the most. You're the one getting the end result of our work." And if
Mhm.
you're not happy, not just me, of course, but
Right.
employers, et cetera, et
Yeah.
cetera, if you're not getting something, then there's a problem. There was a problem with the system. She wasn't. At least I
Mhm.
didn't take it as the teachers. I don't think anybody really thinks that. but she was making a statement about the system, and that kind of hit home with me, and I've been thought about that in those terms ever since.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And the system has issues, but there are a lot of great people that are doing it daily, that are fighting some pretty serious odds and doing some pretty good work. It's interesting. I think one of the biggest problems that we have, though, and I think Paul will concur, is that if you look at most businesses, there's a progression, and so your best and your brightest progress along and get in positions of more authority, more responsibility. But that authority and responsibility still directly pertains to the interface of the business, right? And so, whereas in education, your best and your brightest move on. If they want to move on and if people want to make more money, they have to become administrators or instructional coaches, and et cetera. But it takes them out of the classroom.
Yeah.
And the classroom is the interface. It is unlike any other interaction that you'll have, even in business, because even if you have a customer that you are always interacting with, you are always with, you're not with them 7 hours a day, every day. With that, and that is an odd thing that some of our best teachers, because they want to progress in their careers, they want to make more money and all this, they leave the classroom. And honestly, I believe this: the instant you leave the classroom, you forget a little bit about what it's like to be in the classroom. There's some great people that are principals, but they're not in the classroom. They don't know all the kids. If you got 500 kids and you're in a school, in an elementary school, you don't know all the kids. There's no way.
Possible, yeah.
It's impossible. And so then then kids start becoming abstractions. They start becoming test scores. Start becoming absentee percentages. They start becoming IEPs. They start becoming tag. All those kind of things. They become abstractions. They lose their
Well,
they lose
Scott,
their
in the business sense, I own a lot of Subway restaurants, and
Mhm.
when I owned 1 and 2 and 3, I knew all my employees, right? And I'm
Right.
behind the line, and I'm making subs with them, and I'm
Mhm.
interacting, and they're truly people, right? And
Right.
important people, and in the same vein as what you're discussing here or saying here. And then as I've grown and grown and grown, the majority of my work kind of gets forced into, I'm looking at spreadsheets, and I'm looking at numbers, and I'm looking at all
Right.
these other things that are not people. And
Mhm.
it's a battle I fight all the time, where
Right.
it's like I got to remember that these things, they're important. Don't get me wrong; they're very important. The health of the business is important, just like the running the principal's job is important. But they're
Yes.
not the same thing. It's very easy to lose perspective. So I know exactly what you're saying. I mean, not
Excellent.
exactly, but your point is, even for me as a
Yeah.
business person, I feel the same way, and it's a tough battle.
I think that is pretty much the exact same thing, and I think you said it. I think you said it really well. It's and the more we treat people like abstractions, then the less connected we are, and then the more our decisions reflect those numbers rather than those people, and then that's when you start running into the problems, and that's where people don't feel connected. That's where kids don't feel connected. Those types of things. And I think part of the reason why they feel more connected in elementary school than they do maybe in middle school and high school is because in elementary school they're with one teacher all the time. They're kind
Mm.
of forced to get connected. Whereas when you get to high school, that if you want to shy away and not connect with someone, it's pretty easy to do so. You can sit in the back, you do just enough not to draw attention, all this kind of stuff like this. You can go through high school and not be connected. And I think that's why we lose kids, is because they become a little bit more abstract.
Mm.
So as we wind down, because I mean we could take this for 3 hours, but we're not Joe Rogan. No one's going to listen to us for that long. Uh, I'm going to go on the other side of that real quick. I think when great teachers leave the classroom, yeah, they become disconnected. I feel there's a large number of administrators that leave the classroom because they don't like to teach. And the incentive is I can become an administrator, make lots of money, and now they become addicted to that lifestyle and they're young without experience and they do whatever the superintendents maybe say instead of becoming fighters for us educators.
Right.
Uh, and so it goes both ways, and I've seen it
Yes.
because you've probably I've been asked countless times, how come you're not an administrator? Well,
Uh-huh.
I love being in the classroom. Do you think there could be a model in theory where the school, the staff selects who the leader should be, call it a principal or whatever, and you get like a 3 to 4 year term and you run through it maybe with a cohort from 9 to 12 or K to 6, and then you turn it over and the next person gets voted in? Or can we not
Right.
do that with all the regulations today?
Boy, Paul, that's an interesting idea. Um, I think you could make that work. I think the school would have to be small.
Yeah.
And I think we both know that. I mean, the size of the schools are, and I know a lot of people focus on the size of the classrooms as being the biggest issue. I think the size of the school is just as big an issue because, when you start getting, multi-thousand kids into an area, that's an issue. But I like that, Paul. I think you could find that in rural areas pretty easily. Um, the new school I'm moving to, I don't know if you guys know this or not. It's a kindergarten through 12th grade, and
Whoa.
the whole district is in one school, and it's got 220 kids, kindergarten through 12th grade. And
Wow.
I'm going to be the PE teacher for that whole school.
Wow.
Uh, so that's like a dream job for me. Now it is out in the middle of nowhere, and if you're not familiar with Eastern Oregon and the interior of the west of the United States, it's in the middle of nowhere. We'll just put it that way, which is good for me too. But so I like that, Paul. I really like that. I like the rotation of it. I like the rotation of it, 3, 4 years, like a cohort. You kind of go
Yeah.
through. That's got some merit to it for sure.
But you hit, it's got to be small.
It's
Uh,
got to be small.
and I feel we're going the other way, unfortunately.
I would agree. I think everything's about efficiency. I think everything is about scale. We've
Mm.
John Dewey lost the battle a long time ago to the idea of the factory schools. I mean, that's you know the whole economies of scale just doesn't work with with people. When we're talking about kids and being efficient. It, Being efficient in a school is, I get it. We need to be efficient with our resources, but we don't have to be efficient with everything to the point where we can't have a relationship with the child because we've got to be efficient and go do something else according to the schedule or what have you. And you know but if small, I think I like your idea a lot. I'd be interested. Are there any schools that do stuff like that, Paul?
That I don't know. I want to start trying to research and reach out. I don't
Okay.
think so. I mean, in theory, well, we'll end it. In theory, you could still have the administrator, the paper pusher, the whatever,
Uh-huh.
right? But you almost need like a student teacher liaison or something that's just
Right.
that has power to make decisions, not just like,
Well,
oh, well,
yeah.
hey, how about this? Oh, well, let me ask so and so. And then as soon as they do that,
Right.
they don't really have any
Right.
power.
Well, so one of the things I did at my K-8, so we had a full-fledged sports program there too. Now we didn't have football, but we had, we had volleyball and cross, and then we had boys and girls basketball, then we had boys and girls track. And I coached all of those with the exception of volleyball. So I
Wow.
coached all of them. And for the first 4 or 5 years, I didn't get paid. And my principals kept trying to get me. And I was like, no, 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 I don't want to be paid. And finally, one of them said, why don't you want to be paid? And I said, because the second they pay me, then I have to listen to what they say. And I said, and so I am doing this strictly for the benefit of the kids. And there are certain things I know that they need, but I don't want anyone meddling with my practice schedule, my game schedule, how we get back and forth. I will adhere to all the district policies as far as, how they have to sign up and pay to play and all this kind of stuff. That's great. I don't have a problem with that. But as soon as they start paying me, that gives them, they think, the right to tell me what to do. And I don't want to have to deal with that. So, but finally I did get paid. I was the most reluctant getting paid coach in history, but it worked out.
Well, but that happens. I mean, that,
Yeah.
Hey, promise me at least a year from now, because Matt and I are going nowhere. We're committed with this podcast weekly,
Okay.
weekly, weekly, no matter what. Promise me when you settle in your small school, you come back on. We tried to only go 30 to 45 minutes, but we couldn't stop with you. We're like
Well,
an hour in, and that's a good thing.
I have a tendency to talk, so that's pretty easy for me. Yeah, I would love to, and I got to tell you, this place has two full-size gyms, one for the elementary, one for the high school. It's got a weight room. It's got a 400-meter track. It's got and it's got they are fired up to have a PE teacher. They haven't had one in 2 years, so this is going to be pretty exciting.
Well, you're one of the most authentic guys in education that I've never met until tonight. Personal.
Isn't that
Well,
funny?
this isn't really personal, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's funny, Paul, because we've been in each other's orbits for a really long
Yeah,
time.
yeah,
But
and that's why last night I'm like, so what we do is we'll go a couple guests, and Matt and I have a couple episodes without guests, and Matt, we're
mhm,
like, it's time for a guest again. Who do you got? And you were the first guy that like, it's time for you to come back on, come on. So we
excellent,
we, we love it. It'll be we'll have it out on Sunday. It's Spotify, Apple, YouTube. We're big
excellent,
time in our heads, so
fantastic. Well, this is cool. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I love to chat about this stuff. So it's important. Kids are important.
yeah. Well, you're one of the true guys that I feel someday I'll meet in person. I'll say it right now on the podcast. So,
We'll definitely
uh,
do it.
absolutely, Scott. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, thank you guys.
Thank
Have
you,
a good
Scott.
night.
Enjoyed it. Thank you.
Talk
Thank
soon.
you. Bye bye.
Bye.